Tonight, survivors of the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein will come face to face with Donald Trump when they attend his State of the Union address. It's part of a coordinated attempt to highlight how they believe the White House has mishandled the release of Epstein files.
This is not going away. We will not stop until the truth is faced and justice is pursued.
We'll look ahead to that crucial speech and assess Donald Trump's challenges at home and growing tensions abroad coming up. Plus, after 4 years of war, I hear the deep fatigue and defiance from a Ukrainian medic on the front line.
If we were all to say, this is not our war, this is not my war, I think Russia would be pushing through the rest of Europe at this point.
And inside Russia, our team sees bomb shelters and barricades and survive a near miss from a kamikaze drone.
We were scanning the area for drones and it came out of the blue. We've all jumped out and taken shelter behind this building now as we try and figure out what's going on.
So who is winning this war and will it ever end? We'll bring you our defence analyst assessment coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening. In a few hours' time, the US President will address the nation in his annual State of the Union speech. In the room will be more than a dozen survivors of Jeffrey Epstein who have been invited by Democratic members of Congress. They want to know why ambassadors and princes are being arrested here in the UK, but US authorities are failing to act. Just have a listen.
Today, the world will see Donald Trump have to face these survivors right there in the House gallery and answer for why ambassadors and princes have been arrested in other countries, but here in America, not a single investigation has been announced into the pedophiles and the predators of Epstein's horrific sex trafficking ring. He must answer for why the Department of Justice has still refused to release 3 million remaining files and why they continue the massive cover-up of a depraved Epstein class.
Virginia helped build a road for survivors to walk toward truth, toward dignity, toward justice, and we are here today to carry her torch down that road. We are asking Congress, the public, and every institution with the power to act to carry that torch with us. And that brings me to why we are here, not only to speak, but to demand action. If we truly believe survivors deserve more than sympathy, if we truly believe justice should not depend on status, then we must put it into law. That is why we are calling on Congress to advance Virginia's law. Virginia's law is about saying clearly that the rules that protected abusers and traffickers for decades will no longer stand. It is about closing the gaps that powerful people exploit. It is about strengthening accountability so survivors are not forced to fight alone for years against a machine built to wear them down. It is not vengeance, it is not protection, it is prevention, and it is justice. And to anyone who thinks this moment can be reduced to a headline or a media cycle or even a Super Bowl moment for political theater, let me be clear. The only thing more powerful than hate is love. And this is not going away. We will not stop until the truth is faced and justice is pursued for Virginia, for her survivor sisters, and for every victim and survivor around the world who deserves to know that their lives are worth more than someone else's reputation.
That was Virginia Giuffre's brother there at that press conference, which was held in the last hour or so. And of course, the State of the Union address by President Trump will be in about 4 hours' time. We'll be speaking to my colleague Mark Stone later in the programme and getting his thoughts on the press conference and the State of the Union address. Now, 4 years ago today, Volodymyr Zelensky sat in an underground bunker somewhere in Kiev, making phone call after phone call to world leaders. Earlier that day, Russian tanks had crossed the border. Russian soldiers were raising their flags in his cities.
This office, this small room in the bunker on Bankova Street, this is where I held my first conversations with world leaders at the start of the war. Here I spoke with President Biden, and it was right here that I heard, Volodymyr, there is a threat. You need to leave Ukraine urgently. We are ready to help with that, And here I replied that I need ammunition, not a ride. Such was the choice that millions of Ukrainians made back then. Our people did not raise a white flag, they defended the blue and yellow one.
Volodymyr Zelensky there. Well, today he showed images of that now empty underground complex for the first time, and he paid tribute to the heroes, civilians and soldiers who defended cities, villages and streets. Ordinary people who, he says, formed living walls to stop the Russian tanks. Tens of thousands gave their lives to protect their country. But we know that sacrifice did not completely stop Moscow's advance, and that hundreds of thousands of Russian soldiers and civilians have been killed since February 2022.
And the missile threat is almost every day. And you know, we're kind of afraid now. There will be another missile threat. The lights will go out. It will be cold again.
We'll report from the border city of Belgorod in a moment, but first, after 4 years of war, we'll begin with the voices of 4 Ukrainians from so-called hero cities where residents fought the Russians and won.
It's the first days of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and Tetiana is sheltering underground with her 2 children at their home just outside the city of Chernihiv.
In the morning and at night, all the time, the planes were flying. The cellar was shaking. My daughter was sleeping, and my son and I were on duty because there was a rumour that Russians were walking around the houses. We slept with an axe.
Inside the cellar, it's cold and dark. The children are scared.
I couldn't get out. There was such a panic. I didn't know what was going on.
While her husband Sasha defends the city from Russian attackers, Tetiana and her children only emerge from their basement when it's safe enough to cook on a fire outside. A neighbour's home is hit by shelling, and shrapnel injures their dog. Tetiana's son drags it into the basement and tends to its injuries. Chernihiv is just 90 miles from Kyiv, and the siege left 70% of the city in ruins. Its defence played a crucial role in preventing Russian troops from seizing the capital, and for this, President Zelensky decreed that it be known as a hero city. When the Russians first attacked Chernihiv on the 24th of February 2022, Yuri was trapped. Previously a major in the army, he decided to come out of military retirement to defend his city.
We held the enemy, defending our city of Chernihiv. We joined the tank troops. On March the 5th, during the clearing of enemy forces, our group came under fire. My leg was torn off. 1 person was killed, another was wounded. The guys saved me.
Yuri's left leg was amputated, but he had to be smuggled out of the encircled city by boat so that he could get further treatment abroad. Since getting a prosthetic leg, he has performed in plays across Europe with other injured veterans. Sumy, a city right on the border with Russia that has been battered and bruised over the last 4 years. It was named a hero city by President Zelensky after its citizens took up arms to defend it in the opening days of the invasion. Dmitro was among those who took up arms to protect the city.
People realised that they were responsible for their own lives. They started taking weapons, mostly hunting rifles. But the further we moved away from 24th of February, the more weapons appeared in people's hands that could, one way or another, help them defend themselves against the Russians.
Their courage was not in vain. Just over a month later, Russian troops no longer occupied any towns or villages in the region. Sumy city never fell into enemy hands. Now, Dmitro is deployed to a different kind of battlefield, the grinding combat and relentless danger that is the Donbass front line.
It is easy to think that victory is close, but I do not believe that this will end in 2026. Every day I see how the front behaves, how intense the fighting is. They will do everything to capture the rest of Donbass.
It's constantly in danger. There are frequent rocket strikes. Recently, many FPV drones have started flying here. There's often no electricity, no heating, no water. Life has changed dramatically, and the danger is constant.
Olena is speaking just days after going out on a rescue mission that almost claimed her life.
There is a request to evacuate 2 people who had been injured. One man was critically injured. He couldn't walk, and he had a lot of blood.
She is the only woman in her White Angels unit evacuating civilians from some of the most dangerous places in Ukraine. On this mission, a Russian drone exploded so close to her that the shockwave slammed the door of her armoured vehicle shut, severing her thumb.
I was very worried that we wouldn't be able to leave and reach the hospital in time, save my finger and also save the man's leg, but thank God we managed to get out.
With little progress being made in talks between Ukraine and Russia, Sumi's people say they are losing hope that they will see peace in the next year.
Well, European leaders today reaffirmed their pledge not to abandon Ukraine. The objectives remain, including Hungary, which maintains close ties with Moscow. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper joined the Ukrainian president to light lanterns in memory of fallen soldiers. The Foreign Secretary spoke afterwards to our political editor, Beth Rigby.
Russia's aggression is not going away. We've seen it now towards Ukraine, and we've seen the scale of it towards Ukraine, even though it is failing. And it's failing because Europe has supported Ukraine. It's because countries from across the world, as part of the coalition of the willing and with NATO, have supported Ukraine as well. But there's no doubt that the threat to Ukraine's security is also a threat to Europe's security, and that is a threat to the UK's security as well.
Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper there. Let's go straight to our international correspondent, Alex Rossi, who joins me live from Kiev. And Alex, it's hard to believe, isn't it, that it's been 4 years since we saw Russian tanks rolling in to Ukraine in what was then being described as a special operation that Russia believed, Vladimir Putin believed and was telling his people would last only a few days.
Yeah, today has been another difficult day in a series of very difficult days for Ukraine, but it's been poignant. People here counting the cost, the destructiveness of this war, what it's done to the Ukrainian people, what it has done to Ukrainian society. I was in Mariupol on the day of the invasion. We woke up to the sound of thunderous explosions, and like many people, we thought that the war would be over very, very quickly. In many ways, and people here see it as that, it's a miracle that Ukraine is still standing and still fighting. You're quite right. Vladimir Putin thought it would be a 10-day special military operation. The country would be brought to its knees. It would capitulate. Russian soldiers had even brought specially pressed parade uniforms because they thought that victory would be so easy. It hasn't happened like that at all. And of course, Russia still hasn't managed to secure any of its original military objectives. Now, here today, of course, European leaders came in to show solidarity with Ukraine. The fight is going on the battlefield, of course, but it's also one of industrial capacity and resolve. And the message to Vladimir Putin really is one of defiance. Europe will give emotional, material and financial support to Ukraine until it achieves a just peace. The question, of course, for everybody here is, though, when will this war end? The diplomacy rumbles in the background, but I think people here are not holding their breath that it will deliver any kind of peace in the near term.
Yeah, Alex, you know, I remember being there at the start of the war and talking in terms of it's a matter of when Russian military will take over Ukraine, not a matter of if. And so it is, as you say, extraordinary that the Ukrainians are still standing. But it hasn't been an easy 4 years for Volodymyr Zelensky, who's led Ukraine through this with his European allies. There have been moments of, tense exchanges where he's said to them, I need more. You know, he's traveled around Europe and the United States with shopping lists, demanding more from them. And 4 years on, they've managed to stand still, but it hasn't been easy.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question for certainly people within the Ukrainian government is actually, had they been given more material support at the beginning, would this war even be over? Would it look very, very different? Remember, right at the beginning, all of the red lines from Western powers not wanting to be seen to be too provocative. Yes, they'd give defensive weapons, but they wouldn't give offensive weapons. Now, those red lines have clearly moved. But had Ukraine got more at the beginning, would it have been very different? And would there have been the massive loss of life we've seen? I talk about counting the cost. I mean, look at it in figures, Yalda. 600,000 Ukrainian soldiers killed, missing or injured. Now, many of those soldiers, of course, have had life-changing injuries. I spoke to some of them at a gym in Kiev about their experiences and what they've lost.
Early in the morning, the Russians launched an assault. Heavy shelling began. We started to pull back. There was gunfire. At one point, when I went into the house, something like a mortar or artillery round struck it. I felt a heavy blow to the back of my head. Everything went dark before my eyes. I saw flashes, and then, as it turned out, I lost consciousness. I don't know how long I was out. When I came round, I couldn't see properly. There was a thick haze. I was buried under some stones and bricks. I will say this, no war is worth it. It brings immense suffering, pain, tears, blood, pain inflicted on us by the Russians. No one wanted this war, and we all want it to end. But Ukrainians will fight to the end. That is my personal view.
Sport keeps the lads away from destructive things, alcohol, drugs and the like. It doesn't allow them to dwell on what they'd rather not return to. First of all, as I'm also a veteran, it pains me to see what's happening in our country. It's heartbreaking that our lads return wounded, with amputations. The most important thing is that they do not withdraw into themselves.
And the suffering for civilians continues, of course, as well. I mean, look behind me. The city, there are some lights on, but there are rolling power cuts across Ukraine as Russia continues to attack energy infrastructure, punishing the civilian population for resisting Moscow's aggression. And there's no end in sight. That hardship and terror continues.
Alex, thank you so much for all of your reporting there. Looking now at how Russia has brought war to its own cities. Belgorod is the closest to the fighting, sitting about 25 miles from Ukraine's border. Drone strikes and power cuts there have become the norm, while temporary fixtures like bomb shelters feel increasingly permanent. Our Moscow correspondent Ivor Bennett travelled to Belgorod, where he and his team found themselves in the firing line. Here's his report.
Belgorod is the closest Russian city to the war in Ukraine, and it shows. This apartment block was hit by drones a few hours before we arrived. One flew into Ludmila's bedroom.
It flew in through the window, hit the floor, exploded, and then flew into the other room.
As another air raid siren sounded, she showed us inside. The room had been gutted because of the damage, and the explosion caused cracks in the walls. Ludmila and her husband Vladimir were in the next room when it happened. They know they're lucky to be alive.
We are so tired, you cannot even imagine. Lord, what did we do to deserve this? We lived in Ukraine, we were friends. And look at this, now we're fighting each other.
By invading Ukraine, Russia didn't just export war, it brought it home. There are bomb shelters on every corner. Many buildings are draped in anti-drone nets. And the threat is ever present, as we ourselves found out. We were on our way to the town of Shebekina, 5 miles from the border, when suddenly our vehicle came under attack. It had just been hit by a drone. We don't know why, but our car had become a target.
We were scanning the area for drones, and it came out of the blue. We've all jumped out and taken shelter behind this building now as we try and figure out what's going on.
Kamikaze drones are laden with explosives. They're designed to detonate on impact. For some reason, this one didn't. It lay smouldering in the road before the military arrived to take it away. It was a terrifyingly close illustration of the everyday dangers. Like Moscow, Kyiv denies targeting civilians. But like in Ukraine, civilians here have been killed too. Lisa's mother died in a shelling 2 years ago when they were out shopping together. Lisa was just 8 months old. Her leg had to be amputated after being hit by shrapnel.
I wish there was peace, for children to live full lives. Our children know what vampire strikes are, what drones are, what an FPV is. A child this age doesn't need to know this. They need to know what sledding is, jumping around and playing. There should be a childhood, not this situation.
At an official level, Belgorod has embraced its role as a frontline city, glorifying it even at this museum exhibition that honours the city's air defences. But after 4 years of war, there is frustration here. Life keeps getting harder. Tatiana had been without heating and electricity for 5 days because of Ukrainian strikes on the local power grid.
It's very hard because it's been going on for a long time. And the missile threat is almost every day. And you know, we're kind of afraid now. There will be another missile threat. The lights will go out. It will be cold again.
And that's just it. No one knows when this will end. Peace talks keep hitting a brick wall. Diplomacy can't find a way through. And even if there is a deal, and Russia comes out on top, many here may wonder whether it's all been worth it. Ivor Bennett, Sky News, Belgorod.
Well, we've got an update on Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. He was arrested, as we've reported, last Thursday on the 19th of February. He was released a short time later, but the search of his former Windsor home continued. Police have now said that the searches have concluded in connection with misconduct in public office investigation. They've said that the Thames Valley Police can confirm the searches in Berkshire in connection to its investigation into the offence of misconduct in public office have now concluded. So that police investigation into Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, the police say they finished searches of his former Windsor home. You're watching The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Still to come, can either side claim to be winning this war after 4 years? We analyse the grinding gains and losses of a stalemate.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to. Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think?
It's really unusual.
Mornings with Rich and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
A historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra al-Baghir has this report. And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
It's been said many times that Russian President Vladimir Putin wanted victory in Ukraine within days or weeks when he invaded. 4 years on, not only is that aim shattered, but the war has crossed into Russia too, as we saw from Ivor Bennett's report in the border city of Belgorod. We will speak to Ivor live in a moment after our defence and security analyst Michael Clark maps out the battlefield.
At the 4-year anniversary of the war, a lot of people are making statements about it and asking themselves who's winning. And in particular, is Russia winning or losing the war in Ukraine? Well, there's a yes and no answer to that. So let's look at some of the big issues and try and get some sense of it. 2 or 3 big things to think about: the front line, the effect on world order, and the economy. Let's look at the front line first. If we think about what's happening on the ground, and this is the map that you're all very familiar with, you can see that the Russians have taken Luhansk and Donetsk, about 80% of it. So they've got a lot of the Donbass, plus the land bridge between the Donbass and Crimea. That was very important to them. So there they are, and they've conducted offensives all the way along that front during 2025. Constant, relentless offensives. On the other hand, they still haven't taken the fortress cities. That 20% are the fortress cities they really want, that Ukraine won't give up without a big fight. And the Ukrainians are attacking them, counterattacking all the way along the front. So Russian positions are all vulnerable to Ukrainian counterattacks. And in the last couple of months, there have been more of them, and they've been remarkably successful. What about the world order? Some of the bigger questions. Well, the big strategic issue is NATO. NATO has begun to rearm. 32 nations in NATO, they've taken this war extremely seriously. They may not be doing enough to help Ukraine, but they're certainly helping themselves by trying to defend more actively against Russia for the future. And in particular, Sweden and Finland joined the organisation in 2023 and 2024. Sweden have been neutral since 1812, Finland since 1945. And in joining the alliance, they add a tremendous strategic element to NATO. Because look at St. Petersburg, Russia's second city. It is in a very, very vulnerable position, surrounded by NATO nations. And the Kola Peninsula where Russia keeps its northern fleet, lots of its nuclear forces, lots of its nuclear testing grounds, that's in a strategically difficult place now because of the accession of Sweden and Finland into NATO. So NATO is a great deal stronger and larger than it was in 2022, thanks to Putin's aggression. However, one enormous prospect for Putin is that this war may be creating a real split in the Atlantic, a fissure between the United States, not Canada, but the United States and Europe. Now, Putin didn't create this fissure. President Trump has created it, but Putin can use it. And he can use the Ukrainian war to create a bigger fissure than has ever existed in NATO before. And if he does that, he hasn't yet, but if he does, then he will have achieved a strategic advantage which no other Russian or Soviet leader has ever been able to achieve since the end of the Second World War. And then finally, let's look at the economy. Let's look at the Russian economy. That's really straining at the moment. There are many ways of looking at the Russian economy. This is just one of them. But look at this. This is the inflation rate. So there in the blue is the way inflation has gone since 2022 in the Western countries. And there in the red is the way Russian inflation has gone in that time. So it tells its own story. And that's only one indice. There are others, of course, in terms of Russian interest rates, the falling income from oil and gas sales, the way that the Russian economy has been just bent out of shape by this war, the lack of investment in anything other than war production. All of that shows the Russian economy is coming under some real strain, and it will probably feel that strain during the year.
It's Professor Michael Clark. Let's go straight to our Moscow correspondent, Ivor Bennett. And Ivor, over the course of the last 4 years, frankly, we've heard a lot from Vladimir Putin, false flag operations. His intelligence agencies have made certain accusations against Ukraine, against their Western allies. And even today, on this 4th anniversary, Vladimir Putin, his intelligence agencies accused the United Kingdom and France of trying to provide nuclear weapons to Ukraine.
Yeah, that's right. Quite an extraordinary allegation. He claimed, as he say, that both Britain and France are secretly trying to supply Ukraine with the material or technology to make a nuclear weapon or even a dirty bomb. Now, he wasn't the first to make this allegation today. It first came from Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service this morning. It didn't provide any evidence to back up that accusation. And over the course of the day, Britain and Ukraine dismissed it. The British government said there was no truth in it. But that didn't stop Vladimir Putin from repeating it this afternoon in a speech he gave to the FSB, Russia's security service. Again, no evidence was provided to back up the claim. Have a listen to what he said.
Having failed to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia on the battlefield, the enemy is relying on individual and mass terrorism. This includes shelling cities, sabotaging infrastructure, and assassination attempts on government and military officials. Just another example, the blast yesterday at the Savyovsky train station.
Now, in that speech, Vladimir Putin didn't mention specifically the 4-year anniversary, and no wonder, because this isn't something he wants to draw attention to. It wasn't supposed to last this long, of course, but I think it's no coincidence that he chose today to make this claim about a dirty bomb and the UK perhaps trying to provide a nuclear weapon. I think it's partly to try and distract from the fact that things haven't gone to plan, but also partly to try and help justify the war, which the Kremlin continues to frame as a defensive war against NATO aggression.
Yeah, and we've continued to hear from those Russians who are questioning this war about, what does this mean? Why are we actually continuing this war, the confusion around it? And of course, we saw your report there that this war has also come to Russia. You were in Belgorod. Just tell us a little bit more about reporting from there.
Yalda, I think the thing that really struck me after going to Belgorod was just how open everyone was there and how tired everyone was about when it comes to living under the current situation, living through the war. I mean, normally Russians are very guarded when it comes to speaking about the war, especially to foreign media. That's what we experience here in Moscow, because any kind of criticism of it or perceived criticism can land you in prison. But that's not what we found in Belgorod. Everyone was very happy to speak to us because, as I say, I think they've just had enough. Whether they were for or against the war, they just want it to end. Now, thankfully for us, our experience of the dangers was a one-off. We had this lucky escape. But for the people in that region and for everyone in many parts in Ukraine, of course, this is something they experience every single day, and not everyone does have a lucky escape. So like in Ukraine, I think many Russians just want the whole thing to end. They've had enough. They are exhausted. But at the moment, there is still no sign that the war is going to end anytime soon, because there's no sign that Vladimir Putin is going to stop until he gets what he wants. And that is, of course, something he can sell as a victory.
Yeah, Ivor, just looking at that footage again of the kamikaze drone and the team rushing away. Thank you so much for all of your reporting. This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, the banker who gave up Wall Street to save lives on Ukraine's frontline. My conversation with Victoria Honchuk.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is why it hasn't been stopped.
Next on The World, how the war in Ukraine took one woman from Wall Street to the front line. When Russia invaded, Victoria Honcharuk left New York and returned to Ukraine, becoming a medic treating not just her countrymen, but wounded Russians too. I spoke to her earlier and began by asking why she decided to risk everything.
4 years ago, I wasn't in Ukraine. I was in the United States. I was just starting a very promising career in investment banking and Wall Street and living the American dream. Everything was quite good in my life. But then Russia attacked my country. My mom, my dad, my sister, they all joined the resistance as soon as they could. So they said, we're not going to go anywhere, we're not going to evacuate, we're going to stay at home, and we're going to fight for our home, our town. And that was very admirable. That inspired me a lot. And after a couple of months helping from far away, I said, well, I cannot also stand back. I cannot watch Russia, the biggest country in the world, right, attacking my country, going against everything that I believed in, everything that I grew up with, my culture, my language, just anything that made me me, you know. So for me, war started when I realized that everything that I knew before today, before 24th of February 2022, is not going to be the same way. So for me, it was a very easy decision now that I look back. A lot of people think it was a difficult decision to leave a good career, good life, and go back to Ukraine and go to the front lines. But looking back, for my integrity, I think that is the easiest decision I ever made, is to go back to Ukraine.
Did your parents or did anyone from your family say, listen, just stay in the United States, this is not your war, you're there, you're safe, let us do what we need to do, but you don't have to come back?
Lots of people said that, my mom included. A lot of my friends from the US were not very supportive in what I was doing, because they witnessed me, you know, jump in the hoops, getting into the career that I had, and they thought it was a really bad decision to give it up, and for something they didn't quite understand. But, you know, if we were all to say, this is not our war, this is not my war, I think Russia would be pushing through the rest of Europe at this point.
And then you say you got the support of your sister, you went back. And then how did you join the battalion that you did? And then how did you end up as a medic on the front lines, not just treating Ukrainians, but also treating Russian prisoners of war as well?
Well, as soon as I came back to Ukraine, the first time I went to the front line was actually with an English volunteer, Eddie Dorset, who unfortunately lost his arm and leg a couple of months ago in Pokrovsk. You might have heard about him. But he was the first one who took me to Bakhmut at that point with a humanitarian run. And I met people there that were part of a battalion that I later joined. I had a couple of days of training, and then the next day I was on the way to Zaporizhzhia region.
I mean, that's incredibly dangerous.
I know.
To not have any previous training or experience, a few days, and then to be out there on the front lines of Zaporizhzhia.
Yeah, I was afraid of blood and needles before full-scale invasion, but at that point I just realized this is something that needs to be done. And that's something, you know, the people have done throughout the history. And people, I think a lot of people here in the UK can relate to that.
And then tell me, you know, as I said, you're treating not just Ukrainians, you've treated thousands of people. The Russian prisoners of war, what was going through your mind when you were doing that?
Again, it's something that we have to do, right? I don't get to choose what I have to work with. And as Ukraine, you know, we are following the Geneva Convention. We have to treat prisoners of war, Russians. And I just treat it as part of my job. There's nothing special, but you get to speak with them and understand where they're coming from. And understand that Russia is not going to stop what they're doing right now. They are ready to go further, and they are preparing for something bigger.
I've spent the last 4 years travelling in and out of Ukraine, covering the conflict across the country. Just tell me what it's like for you, though, to see a country that you clearly love very much, is part of who you are, to see it in the state that it's in. I mean, it's mixed, isn't it? From my perspective, as an outsider going there, on the one hand, you see normalcy and people continuing their life, and then on the other hand, you hear the air raid sirens, and then you know that, you know, Russia has launched a series of airstrikes on people in Kiev or elsewhere.
Well, it's difficult, definitely difficult to witness that. But also I'm very proud of Ukrainians, because if you look back at 2022, this is because not everyone evacuated. It's because people have decided to stand up to Russia and protect their land. That is the only reason why we still have something left out of Ukraine, right? And a big portion, because for 4 years, Russia's not been able to take any, you know, large cities, not any bigger parts that they have since 2014. So for me, I'm very proud of my generation as well, because a lot of young people, like I'm 25, my sister's 30, and we have a lot of people that are younger than us that have joined the army having no prior experience. So we have this whole civilian army type, people who have never had any prior education in military or the army. They don't know the theories, they don't know how to fight by the books, but they were able to come up with incredible strategy to resist the biggest, like what they thought the second best army in the world for 4 years. I'm very, very proud of Ukrainians. I'm very proud of my generation who were able to show the great nation we are.
And we've also seen the advancement in technology. I mean, it's turned into a conflict where people are almost learning about warfare through drones, for example, multiple generations now of drone warfare.
One thing they're not going to learn is how to adapt fast. And this is what Ukraine is doing. Ukraine has done decentralization of research and development, where not private sectors, not like big primes, big companies are changing the way warfare is doing, but the militaries themselves. So essentially every company or platoon that uses technology, they have their own research and development group. That is changing things on the front line, sometimes by hours.
Before I let you go, there is one of the reasons you're here today, of course, is marking 4 years, but also there's a portrait of you that's been done by British war artist Max Dennison Pender. Tell me about that portrait, and I believe there's two.
Yeah, there's multiple portraits, but essentially, so Eddie, the person I mentioned in the beginning, his classmate Max, he told me, "Oh, my classmate is coming to paint people on the front line," and I said, "Okay." He said, "But maybe he can paint you or your sister." And I said, "Okay." So he came, well, 3 years ago, almost in 2023, to paint us. And you see some of the paintings on the screen. And I thought it was crazy. But with time, he showed me some pieces, because he's also filming while painting and asking people about their stories and how they come to be where they are, how they feel about the war. And I thought, wow, that's actually very, very powerful, because it's combining art, right, painting, but also with histories of people, and you put like a face on the war. So I think that's very powerful. It's going to be a premiere of the documentary tonight at the Imperial War Museum. So I'm very excited about that.
Victoria, thank you so much for joining us here on the programme.
Thank you for having me.
That was the account of one young Ukrainian medic. Well, today the United Nations Secretary-General described the war as a stain on the world's collective conscience. The UN estimates that 15,000 civilians have been killed in Ukraine since the war began, and that 3,200 children were killed or hurt. We've been hearing from 3 teenagers about what it's like to grow up in a war zone.
My name is Veronica. I am 16 years old.
My name is Lisa. I am 18.
My name is Katerina. I am 14. I was 10 and couldn't imagine what war really meant. Within days, Ukrainian tanks were driving down our street. I'd never seen them before. On March 4th, my birthday, we had to leave the city because Chernihiv was under constant attack from Russian bombers.
I lived under Russian occupation for 2 years in my hometown of Melitopol. The first month under occupation was especially hard. I hate how we've got used to war, how I've grown used to explosions and air raid alerts that can last for 10 hours. It's become the background of life, a new reality in which we try to make plans for the future.
We left to survive. Our neighbours were killed by a shell. We started our lives in Kiev from scratch. We arrived with nothing. In Kiev, I still have to hide from Russians. In bomb shelters during their attacks, I've grown used to the explosions. I cried and kept repeating that I just wanted the war to end. That is still my greatest wish. I just want to go home.
Some of the voices there from Ukraine marking 4 years of this ongoing bloody and brutal conflict. Well, let's return now to Washington, where more than a dozen survivors of Jeffrey Epstein have been invited by Democratic members of Congress to President Trump's State of the Union address. Have a listen.
Today, the world will see Donald Trump have to face these survivors right there in the House gallery and answer for why ambassadors and princes have been arrested in other countries, but here in America, not a single investigation has been announced into the pedophiles and the predators of Epstein's horrific sex trafficking ring. He must answer for why the Department of Justice has still refused to release 3 million remaining files, and why they continue the massive cover-up of a depraved Epstein class.
Virginia helped build a road for survivors to walk toward truth, toward dignity, toward justice, and we are here today to carry her torch down that road. We are asking Congress, the public, and every institution with the power to act to carry that torch with us. And that brings me to why we are here, not only to speak, but to demand action. If we truly believe survivors deserve more than sympathy, if we truly believe justice should not depend on status, then we must put it into law. That is why we are calling on Congress to advance Virginia's law. Virginia's law is about saying clearly that the rules that protected abusers and traffickers for decades will no longer stand. It is about closing the gaps that powerful people exploit. It is about strengthening accountability so survivors are not forced to fight alone for years against the machine built to wear them down. It is not vengeance, it is not protection, it is prevention, and it is justice. And to anyone who thinks this moment can be reduced to a headline or a media cycle or even a Super Bowl moment for political theater, let me be clear. The only thing more powerful than hate is love. And this is not going away. We will not stop until the truth is faced and justice is pursued for Virginia, for her survivor sisters, and for every victim and survivor around the world who deserves to know that their lives are worth more than someone else's reputation.
Let's go straight to our James Matthews, who joins me live from Capitol Hill. And James, Virginia Giuffre's brother ending that press conference that we were just playing there, and her sister-in-law was there as well, alongside some of the other survivors. In many ways, this is all part of the ongoing conversation that we've had about their call for accountability, for justice.
It absolutely is, Yalda. You know, I've been at a few of these news conferences. They are held on Capitol Hill every 2 or 3 weeks. They have been recently. Always very powerful, always impactful. Survivors speaking from the heart, and we heard it there, didn't we? They will be present inside the chamber when Donald Trump gives his State of the Union. It will be fascinating to see how that chamber is populated. More than 40 Democrats saying that they will boycott it, go to alternative events. But representatives, Congress people, they can bring guests with them. And a number in that room, they were presenting the guests that they will bring, survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse. And they spoke about how Donald Trump will look out and see their faces. They're talking about tonight as a night, they said, of strength, an indication, a manifestation of the fact that they aren't going away until they get the justice and accountability they feel that they need. So very powerful sentiments expressed in the past hour. But what a night of political theatre we have ahead. The night of the State of the Union, Donald Trump's biggest television audience, when he sits the country down, tells Americans where he has brought them and where he is taking them. The speech expected to be an hour and more. He has said himself it will be a long speech. Speaking on the economy, he'll touch on that, on border, the immigration crackdown, economic performance, which he will talk up. But, you know, just in terms of the choreography, the cast, it will be fascinating. The men's ice hockey team, they've been invited. In the front row, typically, are the justices from the Supreme Court. Of course, last year, Donald Trump was shaking their hands, patting them on the back, saying thank you to the Chief Justice Roberts. I wonder what the interaction, what the dynamic will be tonight, given that they torpedoed his signature policy just a few days ago on tariffs.
James, thank you so much for bringing us up to date there. So what else is President Trump likely to cover in a speech that's likely to be a test run of the message Republicans will sell to voters ahead of November's midterm elections? Let's go straight to our Mark Stone. And Mark, just listening there to James talk about the fact that this is a chance for the US president to tell the American people where he's brought them and where he's likely to take them.
Yeah, and if you're a US politics geek like me or James, then this is kind of like it's the big night. It's the night that we want to look for all the different moments. It's a rare night where, and this is kind of inside baseball, but it's important. The cameras for one night only are facing both ways, so you get to see the reaction of the audience as well as the reaction, as well as the sort of head-on shot of the president. It's, you know, there've been so many moments over the years. I've been looking back. Gerald Ford famously said, "I must say to you, the American people, that the State of the Union is not good." It was the night where Bill Clinton in 1996 said, "The era of big government is over." And George W. Bush in 2002, it was the moment where he made that memorable speech saying, "States like these constitute an axis of evil." What will Donald Trump say today? It was 2020, I think, where famously Nancy Pelosi ripped up his speech. She was sitting directly behind him and she ripped up the speech. Look, beyond the stuff that James has been talking about, I think kind of the elephant in the room today, I mean, we haven't mentioned it much on our output over the course of the day. Iran, what is going on there? The biggest military build-up for 23 years, American military in the region. Trump is threatening to carry out a strike. Will he announce something tonight? There is speculation he might, although this afternoon at a briefing at the White House, he suggested to reporters that all the Iranians need to do is say, "We will never build a nuclear weapon." That is bizarre because the Iranians have been saying that all along. Believe them or not, they have been saying it. So Iran, a big focus. What will he say there? And then, of course, Ukraine. I was looking back at his speech last year and he said on Ukraine that it was close to being solved. Well, we are a year on. It's no closer.
Yeah, absolutely. He famously said, "I'll end that war in 24 hours" during the campaign. I've got a minute left, Mark, but of course he also wants to reassure Americans on the cost of living and where he is with that.
Look, I think the speech will either be the one he wants to give or it'll be the one that his advisors want him to give. It'll either be him following the auto cue or it'll be him freewheeling. If he follows the auto cue, it'll be a dull speech. It will not be the Trump that we all that made him so popular, the populist leader, but it'll be the one that talks about affordability, the thing Americans care about. If he freewheels, it'll be, you know, the Trump we're all used to. He'll be insulting people in the audience, the Supreme Court justices, all the rest of it. That'll be the one to bring the popcorn out for.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe we'll probably see a bit of that. Mark, thank you so much. And there'll be live coverage of Trump's State of the Union here on Sky News at 2 a.m. That's all from me and the team. We'll have Anna next with the wrap. Good night.